I lost my only son 2 months ago. Last week, his wife told me to pack my bags. She wanted the house for herself and her new friend. I left without a word, but I remembered what my son had whispered to me a year earlier. "Behind the painting, Dad. That thing will protect you." What had he hidden? And why was his widow so desperate to push me out? The grocery bags felt heavier than usual as I climbed the front steps of what had been my home for 30 years. The house looked different somehow. Cleaner, more sterile. The flower boxes Linda and I had planted were gone, replaced with modern geometric planters that looked like they belonged in a magazine. I pushed open the front door and froze. Cardboard boxes lined the hallway, each one labeled in Sienna's precise handwriting. Frank's tools, Frank's clothes, Frank's books. My life, reduced to a dozen brown boxes. "Oh good, you're back." Sienna appeared from the living room, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. Behind her stood a woman I'd seen around the house more and more lately. Mira, the lawyer friend who seemed to have opinions about everything. "We need to talk." I set the groceries on the kitchen counter, my hands surprisingly steady. "What's all this?" "I've made a decision." Sienna crossed her arms, her wedding ring catching the afternoon light. "It's time for you to move out. This arrangement isn't working anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I kept my voice calm. "This is my home, Sienna. Has been for 3 decades. Was your home," she corrected. "Things change. Jessa needs stability, and frankly, having you here is confusing for her. She needs to understand that it's just us now." Mira stepped forward, her dark eyes calculating. "It's really for the best, Mr. Mallory. A fresh start for everyone." I looked around the kitchen where Linda had made thousands of meals, where Tommy had done his homework at the counter, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays. "Where exactly am I supposed to go?" "That's not really my concern," Sienna said, but her voice wavered slightly. "You have until tonight to get your things. I've already arranged for movers to take the furniture you won't need." "Won't need?" I walked into the living room and saw them, men in gray uniforms loading my recliner onto a dolly. My workbench was already gone. "You can't just—" "Actually, I can." Sienna followed me, Mira close behind. "The house is in my name now. Check the paperwork if you want." That's when I saw little Jessa sitting on the stairs, her 8-year-old face streaked with tears. She ran to me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Grandpa Frank, are you really leaving?" I knelt down to her level, smoothing her dark hair. "It's going to be okay, sweetheart." "But Mom says you're not coming back. She says we don't need you anymore." The words cut deep, but I kept my expression neutral. Sienna was watching us with an unreadable expression, while Mira checked something on her phone. "Mr. Mallory," one of the movers called out. "What about this old painting? Lady says it goes to the dump." I turned to see him hefting the oil painting of the mountain lake, the one that had hung in my basement workshop for 15 years. Tommy had always loved that painting, said it reminded him of the camping trips we'd taken when he was young. "No," I said firmly, walking over. "That stays." "Actually, it doesn't." Sienna's voice had an edge now. "I'm redecorating. That old thing doesn't fit the aesthetic I'm going for." I looked at the painting more closely. It was heavy, the frame solid wood with intricate carvings. Tommy had insisted on hanging it himself, spending an entire Saturday getting it positioned just right. "Behind the painting, Dad. That thing will protect you." "I'll take it with me," I said. Sienna shrugged. "Fine, just get it out of here." Lucia, our housekeeper of 20 years, appeared at my elbow. Her weathered hands held a small manila envelope. "Senor Frank," she whispered, "your son, he give me this. For you, he say, when the time comes." I took the envelope, feeling something small and hard inside. Lucia's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Thank you," I managed. The next few hours passed in a blur. I loaded my truck with boxes, the painting secured in the back. My brother Danny had offered me his garage apartment, at least temporarily. It wasn't much, but it was somewhere to go. As I made my final trip to the truck, I found Jessa sitting on the front porch, her small suitcase beside her. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" "Mom says we're having a sleepover at Miss Mira's house. She says it'll be fun." But her voice was small, uncertain. I sat beside her on the steps. "You remember what Daddy used to say about being brave?" She nodded. "Brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right, even when you are scared." "That's right. You're the bravest girl I know." Sienna appeared in the doorway. "Jessa, get your things. We're leaving. Can I call Grandpa Frank?" "We'll see." But the way she said it told me everything I needed to know. I hugged my granddaughter tight, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I love you, Jessa. Don't forget that." "I love you too, Grandpa Frank." As I drove away, I saw Sienna and Mira loading their own suitcases into Mira's BMW. In the rearview mirror, Jessa waved from the back seat until the house disappeared around the corner. That night, in Danny's cramped garage apartment, I sat on the narrow cot and opened Lucia's envelope. Inside was a handwritten note in Tommy's familiar scrawl. "Dad, if you're reading this, it means something's happened to me. Behind the painting, the mountain lake one. That thing will protect you. I made sure of it. Love, T." Also in the envelope was an old car key, brass and worn smooth. It looked like it belonged to a 1960s Mustang, but I'd never owned one. What was Tommy trying to tell me? I looked at the painting leaning against the garage wall, its mountain lake scene peaceful in the dim light. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what my son had hidden. Tonight, I just needed to grieve, not just for Tommy, but for the life I'd just lost. The next morning brought a phone call that set the tone for everything that followed. "Frank, you need to stop calling here." Sienna's voice was crisp, professional. "I've spoken with my attorney, and she advises that all communication should go through her office from now on. I'd only called to ask about Jessa's school pickup schedule. I just want to make sure Jessa gets home safely. Jessa is my concern now, not yours. You're not her guardian, Frank. You're not even really family anymore." The line went silent. I stared at my phone, the words echoing in my head. Not really family anymore. After 8 years of bedtime stories, school plays, and scraped knees, I wasn't family. Danny emerged from the main house carrying 2 cups of coffee. My younger brother had always been the steady one, the one who thought things through. At 65, he ran a small auto repair shop and lived alone since his divorce. "Rough night?" he asked, handing me a cup. "Could be better." I told him about the phone call, about the strange note from Tommy, about the old car key. Danny examined the key, turning it over in his weathered fingers. "This is from a 67 Mustang, maybe 68. You sure Tommy never owned one?" "Positive. He drove that Honda right up until the day he passed." Danny pocketed the key. "Mind if I do some checking? I know a guy who specializes in classic cars." I nodded, grateful for something concrete to focus on. I need to understand what Sienna's really up to. This isn't just about wanting me gone. "You think there's more to it?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Dorian Vance, my old friend from the electrical union. "Coffee? Usual place?" The usual place was Maggie's Diner on 5th Street, where we'd been meeting for coffee every Tuesday for the past 10 years. Dorian was a private investigator now, retired from the city after 30 years as a detective. If anyone could help me understand what was happening, it was him. I found Dorian in our regular booth, his silver hair neatly combed, his sharp eyes taking in everything around him. He'd always been observant. It's what made him a good cop and an even better PI. "You look like hell," he said without preamble. "Feel worse." I slid into the booth and ordered coffee from Maggie herself, a 60-something woman who'd been running the diner since the Carter administration. "Danny called me," Dorian said. "Told me about your situation. I did some preliminary checking." He pulled out a manila folder and spread several papers across the table. Property records, court filings, financial documents. "Your daughter-in-law's been busy," he said. 3 days after Tommy's funeral, she filed papers to have the property deed transferred to her name only. 2 weeks later, she met with a real estate attorney, one Mira Choi. The name hit me like a slap. Mira's a real estate attorney? Among other things, Choi and Partners specializes in property law, estate planning, and asset protection. Very expensive, very discreet. Dorian leaned forward. "Frank, they're moving fast, faster than normal for this kind of thing." "What do you mean?" "Usually, when someone inherits property, they take time to settle in, figure things out. Sienna's acting like she's in a hurry. The question is why." I thought about the boxes already packed when I came home, the movers ready to haul away my furniture, the immediate eviction. She wanted me gone fast. And she wanted you gone before you could look too closely at the paperwork. Dorian tapped the property records. "These documents show some irregularities, signatures that don't quite match, dates that seem rushed." My phone buzzed with another text, this one from an unknown number. "Check the breaker box before it's too late." I showed it to Dorian, who frowned. "Any idea who this could be from?" "None." But something about the message felt familiar, like an echo of Tommy's voice. We left the diner with a plan. Dorian would continue digging into the legal paperwork, while I figured out what Tommy had hidden behind the painting. But first, I needed to get back into the house. That afternoon, I parked across the street from my old home and watched. Sienna's car was gone, but I could see Lucia's beat-up Honda in the driveway. The housekeeper had kept her own key for 20 years. I was betting she still had it. I waited until the street was empty, then walked up to the back door and knocked softly. Lucia appeared almost immediately, as if she'd been expecting me. "Señor Frank," she whispered, glancing around nervously, "you should not be here. I need to get something from the basement. Something Tommy left for me." Her dark eyes studied my face for a long moment. "The señora, she is at Miss Mira's office. She will not be back for 2 hours." Lucia stepped aside, letting me into the kitchen. The familiar smells of lemon cleaner and coffee hit me, and for a moment, I was overwhelmed by memories. Linda making pancakes on Sunday mornings, Tommy practicing his school presentations at the kitchen table, Jessa's artwork covering the refrigerator. "Quickly," Lucia urged. "She has cameras now. In the living room, the hallway." Cameras. That was new. I made my way to the basement stairs, moving as quietly as possible. The workshop looked exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. There was a rectangular outline on the wall where the painting used to hang. But I remembered Tommy's words. Behind the painting. Not under it, behind it. I examined the wall where the painting had hung. The mounting bracket was still there, heavy-duty hardware designed to hold significant weight. I ran my fingers along the edges of the bracket and felt something unusual, a small depression in the drywall, perfectly round and about the size of a quarter. I pressed it and heard a soft click. A section of the wall, about 2 feet square, swung inward on hidden hinges. Behind it was a small safe, its door slightly ajar. My hands shook as I opened it fully. Inside were documents, photographs, and an old cassette tape. But what caught my attention immediately was a letter addressed to me in Tommy's handwriting, dated just 3 months before he passed away. "Dad," it read, "if you're reading this, it means Sienna has made her move. I've suspected for months that she's been planning something. The documents in this safe will protect you and Jessa. The tape explains everything. Don't trust anyone except Lucia. She witnessed everything. Love, Tommy." I heard footsteps upstairs and quickly grabbed the documents, stuffing them into my jacket. The tape went into my pocket. I closed the safe and pressed the wall section back into place just as Lucia appeared at the top of the stairs. "She comes home early," she whispered urgently. I made it out the back door just as I heard Sienna's car in the driveway. My heart was pounding, but I had what I needed. Tommy had left me a way to fight back. That evening, in Danny's garage, I spread the documents across his workbench. What I found changed everything I thought I knew about what happened to my son and my daughter-in-law's intentions. The cassette tape was old, the kind Tommy used to record his band practice in high school. I found an ancient boom box in Danny's garage and slipped the tape inside, my hands trembling as I pressed play. Tommy's voice filled the small space, and for a moment, I could barely breathe. "Dad, if you're listening to this, I'm probably gone. I hope I'm wrong, but I need you to know what I've discovered." Danny appeared in the doorway, took one look at my face, and quietly sat down beside me. "I've been sick for longer than I told anyone," Tommy continued. "The doctors gave me 6 months, maybe 8. But that's not what this is about. It's about Sienna and what she's been planning." The tape crackled with static, then Tommy's voice returned, stronger now. "I hired a private investigator 3 months ago. I needed to know why Sienna was suddenly so interested in our finances, why she was asking about life insurance policies and property deeds. What I found out, Dad, she'd been planning for my passing like it was a business transaction." I closed my eyes, remembering the final months of Tommy's life, how Sienna had insisted on handling all the medical appointments, how she'd been meticulously organized about everything, how she'd seemed almost relieved when the end came. The investigator discovered that Sienna has been in a relationship with Mira Choi for over a year. They met at a legal seminar, and within weeks, Sienna was asking detailed questions about inheritance law, property transfers, and estate planning. Danny let out a low whistle. "Unbelievable. But here's the thing, Dad," Tommy's voice continued. "I stayed one step ahead of them. Everything they think they know about the house, about the insurance, about the trust fund I set up for Jessa, it's not what they think." I paused the tape and looked at the documents spread across the workbench. Property deeds, insurance policies, legal papers I barely understood. But one document stood out, a life estate deed dated just 2 months before Tommy passed. "Danny, look at this." I pointed to the deed. "It says the house belongs to Sienna, but I hold a life estate. That means I can live there for the rest of my life, and she can't sell it or force me out." Danny studied the document. "This signature, it's notarized, witnessed by..." He squinted at the small print. "Lucia Alvarez and someone named Edward Leung." I started the tape again. "I had to be careful, Dad. Sienna was watching everything I did toward the end. But Lucia helped me. She witnessed the real documents, the ones that protect you and Jessa. The papers Sienna has are copies, modified copies that give her what she thinks she wants." My phone rang, interrupting the tape. It was Jocelyn Bright, the branch manager at First National Bank where I'd done business for 20 years. "Frank, I'm glad I caught you. I probably shouldn't be calling, but something's been bothering me about the account activity on your son's estate." "What kind of activity?" "Large withdrawals, transfers to accounts I don't recognize. And today, Sienna came in with papers to close the trust account that was set up for Jessa, the one with the college fund." A wave of icy dread washed over me. "Can she do that?" "According to the paperwork she showed me, yes. But Frank, the signatures looked off. I've been doing this for 15 years, and something doesn't feel right." After I hung up, Danny and I finished listening to the tape. Tommy had thought of everything. Backup documents stored in a safety deposit box I hadn't known existed, video recordings of Sienna and Mira discussing their plans, even financial records showing that Sienna had been quietly diverting money from joint accounts for months before Tommy was gone. "There's one more thing, Dad," Tommy's voice said near the end of the tape. "The key Lucia gave you, it's not for a car. It's for a safety deposit box at Merchants Bank on Oak Street. Box 247. Everything you need to stop them is in that box. The tape ended with Tommy's voice, softer now, more personal. I'm sorry I couldn't tell you all this before I was gone. I was trying to protect you and Jessa from the truth about Sienna. I thought maybe I was wrong, maybe she really loved me. But I couldn't take that chance. You're the only family Jessa has left who really loves her. Don't let them take her away from you, Dad. Don't let them win. Danny and I sat in silence for several minutes after the tape ended. Finally, he spoke. What are you going to do? I looked at the documents, thought about Jessa's tears when I left, remembered Sienna's cold dismissal of 30 years of family history. I'm going to get my granddaughter back, I said, and I'm going to make sure Sienna and Mira pay for what they've done. But first, I needed to get to that safety deposit box, and I needed to do it before Sienna realized what I'd found. The next morning, I was waiting outside Merchants Bank when they opened. The key fit perfectly, and box 247 contained everything Tommy had promised. Original documents, video recordings, financial records, and one more thing that made my heart race. A handwritten letter from Tommy to Jessa, explaining why Grandpa Frank would always be her real family, no matter what anyone else told her. I was going to make sure she got that letter. But first, I had a war to win. The video recordings were damning. Tommy had hidden a camera in the living room during his final weeks, and it had captured hours of Sienna and Mira planning what they called the transition. I watched them on Danny's laptop, my anger growing with each casual discussion of my eviction, each calculation of how much money they'd make selling the house, each dismissive comment about the old man who wouldn't be a problem much longer. We'll need to move fast once he's gone, Sienna said in one recording, sitting on the couch where she'd comforted me during Tommy's final days. Frank's sentimental about the house, but he doesn't understand real estate law. Mira, lounging in my recliner, laughed. By the time he figures out what's happening, we'll have everything transferred and sold. He can complain all he wants from whatever nursing home he ends up in. What about Jessa? Sienna asked. What about her? You're her mother. You decide what's best for her future. I had to pause the video. The casual way they discussed destroying my relationship with Jessa, the cold calculation in their voices, it was worse than I'd imagined. My phone rang. Dorian's voice was grim. Frank, we need to meet. I found something you need to see. An hour later, we sat in Dorian's office, a cluttered space above a hardware store downtown. He'd been a PI for 5 years now, and his reputation for thoroughness was well earned. I dug deeper into Mira Choi's background, he said, spreading photos across his desk. She's not just Sienna's attorney, she's her partner in more ways than one. The photos showed Sienna and Mira at restaurants, holding hands in a downtown park, kissing outside Mira's apartment building. They were dated over the past year, including several from when Tommy was still alive. Sienna was seeing someone else while your son was gravely ill, Dorian said quietly. Tommy knew, I said, showing him the documents from the safety deposit box. He was building a case against them. Dorian studied the papers, his expression growing more serious with each page. Frank, this isn't just infidelity and inheritance fraud. They're planning to take Jessa out of state. He handed me a travel itinerary printed from Mira's email account. Portland, Oregon. They've already enrolled Jessa in a private school there. They're planning to move next month. The room seemed to spin. They can't take her away from everything she knows. They can if they have legal custody and no one challenges them. Dorian leaned forward. But that's not going to happen, not if we play this right. Over the next 2 hours, we developed a strategy. Dorian would continue gathering evidence while I reached out to the witnesses Tommy had mentioned. We needed to move carefully. If Sienna and Mira realized what we knew, they might accelerate their timeline. My first stop was the notary public, Edward Leung. His office was in a strip mall near the courthouse, a small space crammed with filing cabinets and legal forms. Eddie was younger than I'd expected, maybe 30, with nervous eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. When I mentioned Tommy's name, his face went pale. "Mr. Mallory?" he said, glancing around as if someone might be listening. "I was wondering when someone would come asking about those documents." "What documents?" "The ones your daughter-in-law brought in last week. She wanted me to notarize some property transfer papers, but—" He hesitated. Something didn't feel right about them. Eddie pulled out a file and showed me copies of the papers Sienna had brought. They were nearly identical to the real documents Tommy had hidden, but with crucial differences. My life estate rights had been removed, and the trust fund for Jessa had been dissolved. "She said you'd already signed them, that you just needed the notarization," Eddie explained. "But the signatures looked different from the original documents I'd notarized for your son. And she was in such a hurry, kept checking her phone, seemed nervous." "Did you notarize them?" Eddie looked ashamed. "She said it was urgent, that there was a buyer waiting. I made a mistake. I should have insisted on seeing you in person." "It's not too late to fix this," I said. "Would you be willing to testify about what really happened?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, absolutely. I've been feeling sick about it ever since." My next stop was the elementary school where Jessa was enrolled. I'd been picking her up twice a week since she started kindergarten, and the staff knew me well. Principal Martinez greeted me warmly, but her expression changed when I explained why I was there. "Mr. Mallory, I'm sorry, but Sienna Mallory came in yesterday and removed you from Jessa's approved pickup list. She said there had been some family changes." "What kind of changes?" "She didn't go into details, but she did mention that Jessa would be transferring to a new school soon. She requested all of Jessa's records." I felt sick. They were moving even faster than I'd thought. "Has Jessa said anything about this?" Principal Martinez hesitated. "She's been different this week. Quieter. Yesterday she asked me if people could be forced to move away from their grandparents." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that families sometimes have to make difficult decisions, but that love doesn't depend on distance." She paused. "Mr. Mallory, is Jessa okay? If there's something I should know—" I wanted to tell her everything, but I knew I had to be careful. "Just keep an eye on her, please, and if she seems upset or scared, call me." That evening, I met with Lucia at a small cafe near her apartment. She'd been nervous about meeting in public, but I needed to understand exactly what she'd witnessed. "Your son, he was very careful," she said, her accent thickening with emotion. "He knows something was wrong with the Señora. He asked me to watch, to listen." "What did you see?" "Phone calls late at night, when she think he was sleeping. Always the same person, Miss Mira, and papers, always papers. She hide them in her purse, take them when she think no one is looking." Lucia reached into her own purse and pulled out a small notebook. "I write down what I see. Dates, times, what they say." The notebook was filled with careful entries in Lucia's neat handwriting. Conversations about selling the house, discussions about getting rid of Frank, plans for moving to Oregon with Jessa. "There's one more thing," Lucia said quietly. "The day before Señor Tommy passed, he gave me something else." She handed me a sealed envelope. He said, "If Frank needs proof that I was thinking clearly at the end, give him this." Inside was a letter from Tommy's doctor, confirming that he had been mentally competent and fully aware of his decisions right up until his passing. It was dated the same day he'd signed the real estate documents. "Lucia," I said, "would you be willing to testify about all of this in court?" She nodded firmly. "Señor Tommy was good to me. His little girl deserves better than what they are planning." As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Tommy was gone. Hope. We had evidence, we had witnesses, and we had the truth on our side. But I also knew that Sienna and Mira wouldn't go down without a fight. And they had resources I didn't: money, legal connections, and the presumption that a grieving widow's wishes should be respected. The real battle was about to begin. The call came at 6 in the morning, jolting me awake in Danny's garage apartment. "Frank, they're gone." Dorian's voice was tight with urgency. "Sienna and Mira cleared out of the house sometime last night. Neighbors saw a moving truck. I was already reaching for my clothes." "What about Jessa?" "Unknown. I'm heading to the house now." I made it there in record time, my truck's engine protesting as I pushed it harder than I had in years. Dorian was waiting in the driveway, his expression grim. The house looked abandoned. The windows were dark, and when we peered through the front window, we could see empty rooms where furniture used to be. "The neighbors said the moving truck left around midnight," Dorian said. "Professional operation. Very quiet." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Jessa is safe. Meet us at Maggie's Diner at 9 a.m. Come alone. L." "Lucia," I breathed, showing Dorian the message. "It's a trap," he said immediately. "Maybe. But if there's a chance Jessa's okay, then we do this smart." Dorian was already on his phone. "I'm calling in backup. If this goes sideways, I want witnesses." At 9 a.m. sharp, I walked into Maggie's Diner alone, but I knew Dorian was watching from across the street, and Officer Mason Greer, an old friend from the neighborhood, was having coffee at the counter. Lucia sat in a back booth, her face drawn with exhaustion. Beside her was Jessa, picking at a plate of pancakes. "Grandpa Frank!" Jessa launched herself into my arms, and I held her tight, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" She nodded, but I could see the confusion and fear in her eyes. "Mom said we were going on a trip, but then she and Miss Mira started fighting, and Mom was crying, and then Lucia came and got me." I looked at Lucia over Jessa's head. "What happened?" "They had a falling out. Miss Mira, she find out about the real documents. She very angry with the Senora. They fight, loud fight. The Senora, she realized she been played too." "Played how?" Lucia glanced around nervously, then leaned forward. "Miss Mira, she never planned to take them both to Oregon. She just want the money from selling the house. She tell the Senora last night. Jessa would be too complicated for their new life." The pieces fell into place. Mira had been using Sienna just as much as Sienna had been using her. When the inheritance scheme fell apart, Mira had cut her losses. "Where's Sienna now?" "Gone. She takes some clothes and her car. Miss Mira too, but they leave Jessa." Lucia's voice was fierce with protective anger. "They leave this little girl like she is nothing." I hugged Jessa tighter. "You're not nothing, sweetheart. You're everything." But even as I comforted my granddaughter, I knew our problems were far from over. Sienna was still legally Jessa's mother and my daughter-in-law. She could come back at any time and reclaim both Jessa and the house. That afternoon, while Jessa napped in Danny's guest room, I met with a lawyer, not one of Mira's expensive colleagues, but Sylvie Noren, a family law attorney Dorian had recommended. Sylvie was in her 40s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She reviewed all of Tommy's documents with the thoroughness of a surgeon. "Your son was very smart," she said finally. "These documents are legally sound, and the evidence of fraud is compelling. But we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "Sienna is still Jessa's legal guardian. Even if we prove she committed inheritance fraud, that doesn't automatically terminate her parental rights. And if she comes back and demands custody—" "She abandoned Jessa," I said, "for one night. A good attorney could argue she was in emotional distress, that she made a temporary mistake." Sylvie leaned forward. "Frank, I think we can win this, but we need Sienna to make a bigger mistake. We need her to show a pattern of putting her own interests ahead of Jessa's welfare." That evening, as if summoned by our conversation, Sienna called. "Frank, I want to see my daughter." Her voice was different, smaller, less confident. I put the call on speaker so Dorian and Danny could hear. "Where have you been, Sienna?" "That's not your concern. I want Jessa back, tonight." She's asleep. She's had a traumatic day thanks to you. I'm her mother, Frank. You can't keep her from me. I'm not keeping her from anyone, but I'm not letting her go with someone who abandoned her either." There was a long pause. "I didn't abandon her. I left her with Lucia. After trying to take her out of state without telling me, after cleaning out her college fund, after lying to her about everything. You don't understand the situation. Then explain it to me." Another pause. "Meet me tomorrow at the house, noon. Bring Jessa." "The house you illegally evicted me from? It's my house, Frank. The sooner you accept that, the better for everyone." After she hung up, the three of us sat in silence for several minutes. "It's a trap," Dorian said finally. "Of course it is," I agreed. "But it's also an opportunity." "For what?" I looked at Tommy's documents spread across Danny's kitchen table, thought about the video recordings of Sienna and Mira planning their scheme, remembered my granddaughter's tears. To end this once and for all. The next morning, I called Sylvie Noren and told her to be ready. Then I called Officer Greer and asked him to do a welfare check at the house around noon. Finally, I called Eddie Lung and asked him to meet me at the house with his notary equipment. "What are you planning, Frank?" Danny asked as I loaded the documents into my truck. "I'm planning to give Sienna exactly what she's asking for," I said. "The truth." At 11:30, I pulled up to the house I'd called home for 30 years. Sienna's car was already there, along with a black sedan I didn't recognize. Through the front window, I could see people moving around inside. Jessa squeezed my hand as we walked up the front steps. "I'm scared, Grandpa Frank. Remember what Daddy used to say about being brave? Brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do what's right even when you are scared." "That's right, sweetheart. And today, we're going to be very brave." Sienna opened the door before we could knock. She looked terrible. Her hair unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes. Behind her stood Mira and two men in expensive suits. "Jessa, baby," Sienna said, kneeling down. "Mommy's so sorry about yesterday. Everything's going to be okay now." But Jessa didn't run to her mother. Instead, she pressed closer to me. "I want to go home with Grandpa Frank." Sienna's face tightened. "This is your home, Jessa. Our home." One of the men stepped forward. "Mr. Mallory, I'm Soren Morrison, Ms. Mallory's attorney. We need to discuss the current living arrangements." "I bet we do." I looked around the living room, noting the camera equipment set up in the corner, the documents spread across the coffee table. "Quite a production you have here." Mira spoke for the first time. "We're simply documenting the transfer of property and custody to ensure everything is legal and binding." "Funny thing about legal and binding," I said, pulling out my own folder of documents. I brought some paperwork, too. I handed copies of Tommy's real documents to Morrison, watching his expression change as he read. "These are forgeries," he said after a moment, but his voice lacked conviction. "Are they?" I pulled out my phone and hit play on one of Tommy's video recordings. Sienna's and Mira's voices filled the room, discussing their plans to defraud me and sell the house. Sienna went white. "Where did you get that?" "From my son. He knew what you were planning, Sienna. He knew about you and Mira, about the money you were stealing, about everything." Mira stepped forward, her composure cracking. "Those recordings are illegal. They can't be used." "Actually, they can," said a new voice from the doorway. Sylvie Noren walked in, followed by Officer Greer and Eddie Lung. "This is a one-party consent state, and since Tommy made the recordings in his own home, they're perfectly admissible." Morrison looked at the documents again, his face grim. "Ms. Mallory, you didn't tell me about these complications." "Because she didn't know about them," I said. Tommy was very careful to protect his real intentions. I knelt down next to Jessa, pulling out the letter Tommy had written to her. "Sweetheart, your daddy wrote you a letter. Would you like me to read it to you?" She nodded, and I opened the envelope with shaking hands. "My dearest Jessa," I read aloud, If Grandpa Frank is reading you this letter, it means I'm not there to tell you these things myself. I want you to know that you are the most important thing in the world to me, and that Grandpa Frank loves you just as much as I do. He will always be your family, no matter what anyone else tells you. The house where you grew up, where Grandma Linda taught you to bake cookies, where Grandpa Frank read you bedtime stories, that will always be your real home. I've made sure of that. Be brave, be kind, and remember that love is stronger than anything else. All my love, Daddy. Jessa was crying, and so was I. Even Officer Greer had tears in his eyes. Sienna broke the silence. That doesn't change anything. I'm still her mother. Yes, you are, Sylvie Noren said, stepping forward. But you're also a mother who committed fraud, who stole from your daughter's college fund, who planned to take her away from her only remaining family, and who abandoned her when your scheme fell apart. She handed Morrison another set of documents. Petition for emergency custody, filed this morning. Mr. Mallory is requesting temporary guardianship, pending a full investigation of the inheritance fraud. Morrison scanned the papers, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Ms. Mallory, I think we need to discuss this privately. But Sienna wasn't listening. She was staring at Mira with a look of pure hatred. This is all your fault, she said. You told me this would work. You told me we could have everything. Mira stepped back. I never told you to forge documents. That was your idea. My idea? You're the lawyer. You're the one who said Frank would never figure it out. Ladies, Officer Greer interrupted, I think we need to continue this conversation at the station. That's when Sienna finally broke. I didn't want any of this. I just wanted to start over, to have a life that wasn't about taking care of sick people and old men and… She looked at Jessa, seemed to realize what she was saying, and stopped. But it was too late. The damage was done. Eddie Lung stepped forward with his notary equipment. Mr. Mallory, if you'd like to file the official paperwork restoring the property deed to its original status, I can notarize that right now. As Eddie prepared the documents, I looked around the room one more time. At Sienna, who had lost everything through her own greed and deception. At Mira, who was already calculating her exit strategy. At Officer Greer, who was documenting everything for his report. And at Jessa, who was looking up at me with trust and love in her eyes. Grandpa Frank, she said quietly, are we going home now? I picked her up, holding her close. Yes, sweetheart, we're going home. 3 months later, the legal battles were over. Sienna had pled guilty to inheritance fraud and agreed to relinquish custody in exchange for supervised visitation rights. Mira's law license was under review, and she faced criminal charges for her role in the scheme. The house was officially mine under the life estate deed Tommy had created, and I was Jessa's legal guardian. The college fund had been restored, and the trust Tommy had set up would ensure Jessa's future was secure. But more importantly, Jessa was happy. She was back in her old school, sleeping in her own room, surrounded by people who loved her unconditionally. On the anniversary of Tommy's passing, Jessa and I visited his grave together. She placed a drawing she'd made on his headstone, a picture of the 3 of us standing in front of the house, all of us smiling. Do you think Daddy knows we're okay? She asked. I thought about the painting that still hung in the basement, about the hidden compartment Tommy had built to protect us, about the love that had reached across loss itself to keep his family safe. I think he knows, sweetheart. I think he's always known.